Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be talking about a spicy topic, which is how belief in witches economically holds back Africa. And we will be going over a number of articles on this. One is a great Aporia piece, which is how belief in witches holds Africa back or something like that. We'll get to it in a second. Actually, I'll start with a quote from it because people might be hearing this, and I think the way their brain is translating it is poor, uneducated people in Africa believe in witches, and these people are arguing somehow this affects everyone. That is not what we are arguing here.
Okay.
So to quote from the article, one might assume that formal education would provide a safeguard against magical thinking. However, research suggests that schooling alone is not sufficient. In a 2014 study, Henry Reidman and colleagues compared cognitive ability and epistemic rationality in Nigeria and Germany. They found belief in supernatural forces was prevalent even among the educated Nigerians. Surveys of African university students have reached similar findings. In a sample of Nigerian students, many argued that Western countries were more technologically advanced because they possessed magical powers that they refused to share with Africans. Now, I should note here, this came from a study called Witchcraft and African Development, Eric Leischer, and it was published in 2014. So this is an academic study that goes and asks Nigerian college students, why are Western countries wealthier? And their answer is, they have magic they haven't shared with us. That this is college students in Nigeria.
That's pretty wild.
I want to clarify that. The Afrobarometer survey shows that in some countries, educated people are more likely to believe in witchcraft, not less. These results underline that the education system. So this comes from a study called Power, Politics, and the Supernatural, exploring the role of witchcraft beliefs for government's development by Joanna Sophie Eldson, Dan Baki, and Baldface Delay. And specifically in Malawi populations, they found 74% of the population believed that witchcraft is an integral part of daily life, and educated residents were more likely to be inclined towards this belief than less educated residents.
More educated is more like, that's so interesting.
And actually, same with social status. More social status meant more belief in witches. Less social status meant less belief in witches.
That is completely the opposite of what I would think. How is this happening?
Well, what you are misperceiving is what is associated with social status and what is associated with education. And this is what the West fundamentally doesn't understand. They think if you go and you learn what they tell you in education, you know more of what's true, not just more of the mindset of the dominant culture within that region. And what's actually happening is when they are educated and they are not the country bumpkin, you haven't even heard of witches? Let me explain to you the complicated nature of witchcraft.
To your point, the universities of the United States start, broadly speaking, where the urban monoculture reaches anyone who thus far had only gone to Catholic school or a religious school or homeschool or whatever.
And I want to be clear that I don't think that this is true of all African cultures and communities, but that it is true of any African cultures and communities is telling and could mean a lot in terms of the development of economic systems within these regions. And we'll get to how it ends up. And what I mean by this, by brainwashing, there's actually a great Atlantic piece we have to do a piece on that's titled, get this, The Liberal Misinformation Bubble About Youth Gender Medicine, How the Left Ended Up Disbelieving the Science.
Interesting. Okay.
Atlantic.
Wow.
And specifically what the piece is on is the belief that, it increases a kid's risk of taking their life if they don't go through gender transition. And they point out here that actually the Supreme Court case on this unveiled that is just completely without any evidence at all. All of the evidence for this is apparently fabricated or not fabricated, but it just doesn't hold up to the counter evidence that this isn't the case. And this is what's admitted in court. But what I mean there is that is a religious belief which is spouted by people who have been indoctrinated within the university system or centers of power within our own society. So, who are we to laugh at, Africans for believing in witchcraft when we believe that, kids are less, if you surgically mutilate a child and put them on puberty blockers, that they will be less likely to take their life. That's
Right.
something that anyone should be like, that doesn't sound true to me at all. But apparently, and I would put this in the context of, gendered non-contented youth, the 2023 study that showed that of 13-year-olds who are not content with their birth gender, more than 9 of 10 of them by the age of 23 are completely content with it. So, we know that, at this stage, this is a phase from the evidence.
Mhm.
But to keep going with the witch thing, because let's talk about witches here. Arrests and evidence here. Now, this I found really fascinating to learn about. In mid-2024, Zambian police, so this is mid-2024, December 20th, actually 2024, so I guess late, in mid-December 2024. Zambian police arrested Justin Matabliz Konabe, 42, and Leonard Fari, 43, Zambian village chief, at a Luska hotel room. Authorities seized ritual items, a live chameleon sealed in a bottle, white powder, red cloths, animal tail, along with multiple containers of traditional medicines. They were charged with practicing witchcraft. They were hired by Nelson Banda, the brother of fugitive former MP Emmanuel J.J. Banda, who escaped custody. They were trying to hex the president, okay? They agreed. So the payment varied in reports, but they were paid $7,400, around 43 million Zambian kawa.
Wow.
Although other testimonies suggested they could have been paid over $1 million to cast these hexes. So, high wealthy people, brothers of mainstream politicians are hiring expert witches to cast things on other politicians. And we're talking about
and also it's illegal. Whereas I don't think witchcraft is illegal in the US because, or at least in most US states, because I think most US states don't think witchcraft is a thing. I mean, I think the very fact that they were arrested for it means that there's some understanding that 1, it's real, and 2, it's dangerous.
Well, if you're looking at Zambians, 79% of Zambians reportedly believe in this.
Oh,
so you're
wow.
talking
But
about
it's interesting that it's also illegal. So they believe in it, but you can get arrested
they
for
don't
it.
like it. They think witches are evil. I'd point.
Is it though? I mean, when you and I were in Johannesburg and we went to that traditional market,
well,
it was
we'll get to
full
this.
of
They
witchcraft
think
stuff.
that there's like a type of dark witch that's evil, but then there's
Oh,
like
so like the
witchcraft.
dark magic is probably illegal, and then the like sympathetic magic and like healing magic is fine.
Like, and I will note that I talk about all of this with a lot of consternation because this is their culture and their religion, and they have a right to this. But we will talk about how these cultural beliefs, as we go further into this, prevent effective entrepreneurship within these countries, and that this is very damaging to them. And it's also, if you're talking about 79% of Americans don't believe in God, I would guess. This shows how permeated these societies are.
Yeah, it's a lot of faith in a world that is becoming increasingly faithless. That we'll talk about that I have outlined an episode on rising new secular religions. But yeah, it's a lot though. Like there's something powerful here. If that many people believe in something that is not backed up by science or physics.
And the Zambian traditional healer, Dr. Vogo, based in a wealthy suburb of Luska, admitted to serving mostly middle and upper class clients, especially women seeking protection from spiritual harm.
Wow.
So what's interesting here is who is buying this. It is the African version of the American crystal lady.
Crystal lady or person who pays for psychics or zodiac stuff or
which are often upper middle class women.
Yeah. No, it's white women buying from Goop, but go on.
Well, is that not Goop? Is this not the Goop? But the point I'm making here is, again, you see heavily upper middle class thing. And if you're like, again, how could this hurt an economy? Even think about what I've said so far, that Nigerian students would believe that the West was wealthier because they had magic they weren't sharing.
And that's an external locus of control. And there's a few.
It makes it incredibly hard to think about how you can economically develop your own country if you misattribute why your country is in an economically challenging position.
Yeah, well, and especially if it's someone else's fault and out of your control. What are you going to do?
Well, it's not just what are you going to do, it's what you would do. Okay, I want my country to be stronger. I need to find out the magic that they have that we don't have.
Oh, right. So even if you decide to take action, it's really not going to work out for you.
It's not going to work out for you. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Before we get to the core piece, let's keep going through some other examples here. In April 2025, CBS and AFP and Amnesty reported on hundreds of mostly older or disabled Ghanaian women who have been physically attacked, sometimes burned or stoned after being accused of witchcraft. Keep in mind, this was in
Oh,
2025. Many ended up
whoa.
banished to witch camps as the only means of survival. Even
Witch
though
camps.
Ghana's Yes, and this is even though Ghana's parliament passed a bill in 2023 making witchcraft accusations illegal, it hasn't been enacted yet, so daily abuse continues.
Okay, hold on. Do you know anything? Like, is a witch camp a safe space for witches, or is this like a concentration camp for people who've been accused of witchcraft?
Let's talk about one. Gambaga, located in Ghana's northeast region, now houses around 100 banished women in about 25 huts. So keep in mind how many women that is per hut. A lot.
Yikes. Yeah, not great.
Many are widows, longtime residents of towns and cities, often known in urban areas. They include educated women suffering Alzheimer's or dementia, whose medical symptoms are misinterpreted by families and neighbors as witchcraft. So this is
Oh,
almost like
vulnerable
um,
women. This is not
that's
good.
so sad, right? Like old ladies
Yeah.
who get Alzheimer's and then are sent to like concentrate, but it's their culture's version of like an asylum almost combined with like actual dangerous individuals or whatever,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
really sad situation that we're seeing here. In 2024, the Guardian highlighted that many people with dementia across Nigeria, so keep in mind this isn't just there, are branded as witches. Across Nigeria, people living with dementia are often accused of witchcraft. Symptoms such as forgetting basic details and changes in behavior are seen as evidence of evil. People have been set on fire, stoned, beaten to death, or buried alive. Um,
Oh,
Often they
no.
target the elderly, urban, or educated individuals who erratic behavior or memory loss was blamed on evil curses. That is really sad. Although the most documented cases occur in rural areas, witch hunts in Mali often involve educated villagers. A notable case described a married couple accused of causing illness via witchcraft, promoting villagers to call in a witch finder. Although they lived in a mixed community, modern education and income did little to shield them from the collective and subsequent panic. So now we're going to go into a Forbes article titled, we're just going to do a short excerpt from it, Magic, Spells, and Money. A local television station in Kenya recently ran a series on witch doctors. At a witch doctor shrine on the outskirts of Nairobi, expensive cars drove in and out. Politicians were looking to bewitch their electorate, and contractors were looking for charms to win huge tenders. All over Africa, people battle remotely by using charms. The affluent, worried about losing their wealth or seeking to suppress rivals, will pay a fortune for protection from their enemies to improve their luck. This witch doctor was clearly not the kind found in villages who paid in animals and food, so it's little wonder that he owns a huge compound in an area that the middle class would need some magic to afford. Politicians are some of the biggest consumers of black magic. Some pay $10,000 per visit. With elections on the horizon in a good number of African countries, magicians and witch doctors are looking forward to even bigger boom in their business. At Kenya's latest polls, presidential contenders were rumored to fly out to visit the most potent witch doctors south of the country. A Pew Research Center
Whoa.
survey conducted in 2010 showed that a quarter of Kenyans believe in witchcraft, despite being deeply religious. Kenya was ranked as the 11th most religious nation in Africa and 16th in the world. 78% of Kenyans are Christian and 10% are Muslim. Close to 9 out of 10 people stated that religion played an important role in their lives, but most of them forget the Bible or the Quran soon after worship and seek solace in shrines and witch doctor dens. According to the report, a quarter of Kenyans, both Christian and Muslim, confess that they believe in the protective power of juju, charms, and amulets, and that they consult traditional healers.
This reminds me, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you can both be Christian or Muslim and then also believe in these things, because it was such a thing that I saw in Japan. Like, you could have these two belief systems like Shinto and Buddhism live right next to each other. And it's like, well, okay, of course, like if you have a baby or it's this holiday of the year, you go to your Shinto shrine. if someone dies, you go to the Buddhist temple. Like there was a time and a place. It was very context based. And people, I mean, they're very familiar with switching everything about their identities based on their context, whether they're at work or home or with a friend versus their kids.
And I think that what we're seeing here, and we'll get into this more, but it's this ability to externalize failures to supernatural forces or externalize wins to supernatural forces that makes it harder for a region to economically develop. And the more normalized this is, the more difficulty you're going to have. And now I'm not saying this is the only reason. Africa has a lot of reasons having trouble with economic development, but I'm saying this is a contributory reason that people just don't talk about because it's offensive to mention.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the important thing too, we're not critiquing them for believing in witchcraft. We're critiquing them for having an external locus of control. I don't care if you believe in it, if like for some reason it helps you take personal responsibility for things in a way that's connected with reality, meaning you can actually solve problems. But this is not that.
But I'd argue we even see this in the West. If you look at, Catholic countries, which are more likely to have, healing shrines, they're more likely to have saint worship, they're more likely to have a lot of the sort of Christian magic, I guess I'd call it. They are dramatically less economically developed than the Protestant countries that strictly banned a lot of this stuff a long time ago. Even in environments where they probably should be much more economically developed. And I think that this is probably the core, or one of the core reasons why Catholicism leads to such slow economic development, is because of the tendency and of the Catholic Church to incorporate local mystical traditions and shrines and stuff.
It's the mysticism.
And I note here that this is actually way more of a problem for Catholic communities in Catholic majority countries than it is in historically Catholic countries than it is for Catholic communities in the United States. Like if I engage with Catholics in the United States, I don't see them going to like healing shrines or
they're not praying to statues of saints.
But if I go to Catholic communities in, say, Mexico or Latin America, this is something you'll see very frequent. Oh, this is where you go to put this on you to heal.
No, you can't walk down the street without passing a Catholic saint statue that people are actively praying in front of. If you're riding in an Uber or a taxi, half the time you're going to see the driver cross themselves at every stoplight. Like, it's deep there.
And so I'm saying this isn't me picking on Africa. It's just that in Africa, these beliefs are more developed and it leads to the negative externalities that are associated with these beliefs. But more on that in a second. We're going to go to another piece here. And this is by an aid worker who was very surprised what he found when he went to Africa in a piece he titled Malice in Mali, a case study in modern witchcraft accusations. And I'm just jumping around this piece, so we're only going to get a short segment from it. I asked how common the attacks were. Here in Karanga, witchcraft accusation cases are rampant, Magari told me. Maybe every day you see these conflicts where someone is accused of witchcraft. He said it is very common, especially in the Karaga and Chiptag districts in Mali's northern region. I was shocked. I'd expected maybe a case every month or two, though outright violence against police officers is rarer than witchcraft accusations. There is both a latent and explicit hostility towards police. Many accused witch cases remain unreported, and when police are summoned, often the villagers don't trust or don't understand why. They see it as an internal dispute that should be handled within the village, and they often will attack police believing that they're sided with witches. The social dynamics of witchcraft accusations are complex, and much more so in the context of rural Malian society and tribal alliances. When I asked why the village chief had been unable to protect the accused witches, Wonderful explained another nuance. Chiefs do have some power and authority in rural villages, but their position is tenuous and fraught. They risk losing status if they are perceived as protected witches too much. Like police officers, they must walk a fine line. A village chief who consistently and strongly condemns mob justice against accused witches runs the real risk of being replaced by another chief who has no such qualms about summary justice. In this case and in many others, the chief navigates this by appealing to the law, insisting it's a criminal matter, and seeking police intervention. There is an office that is supposed to handle these sorts of issues, the District Peace Committee, but Wonderful was not optimistic. Like the police, they are often understaffed and underfunded. The situation is complicated by the fluid and sometimes interchangeable roles of healers and witch finders in Africa. After all, the afflicted or neighbors believe then a given injury or illness is magical instead of biological in origin, they will seek remedy. In Imagining Evil, Witchcraft, Beliefs, and Accusations in Contemporary Africa, Catholic priest Hugo Hinford notes that neighboring Zambia, in the northern provinces, most districts are regularly visited by Shinagas, healers, and herbalists. Through professional organizations, they have certificates that indicates the cures in which they are known and specialized. A good number of them are inclined to go beyond the well-defined limits of their profession. It appeared that 60% of the herbalists were prepared to exceed the limits of their professional competence due to pressures from their clients, who not only asked them to diagnose and heal, but also to indicate through divination who had caused the particular disease, ailment, or
Oh
misfortune.
no. Oh.
This led to the witch hunting. So this is 60% when they go in, the herbalists are like, okay, and this is who you should hurt for this illness you have.
This is so similar. I've been listening to some podcasts that I've been listening to the Textory podcast, which goes over some old texts, and she does a couple of podcast episodes on like witch trial texts, like court records. And it's so similar to like the Guernsey witch trials and other witch trial texts.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this person got me sick. This person caused me to miscarry. This person caused my horse to die. And it's so interesting how this appears to be a very instinctual human reaction.
If something bad happened to you, whose fault is it?
Yeah, who did it? Yeah, like, well, clearly my neighbor. Like there were instances in these records where like this woman, like had a conflict with this neighbor a long time ago, and then the neighbor's horse died, and the neighbor's like, I knew it was her.
So Simone, I'm gonna do you a favor here. You can take out your headphones for a second, and I'll let you know when you can put them back in.
Thank you. You just wave your hand at me, okay?
I'll wave my hand at you. So now we're going to talk about spirit children in Ghana. In traditional beliefs in northern Ghana, see the disabled or chronically ill infants as spirit children, chikinu or kinukinu, who are born to bring misfortune. Villagers sometimes kill or attempt to exorcise these babies, ritual seen as necessary to protect the family. And you might be like, how rare is this? Well, despite Ghana criminalizing the practice in 2013, such practices have been linked to infant deaths at the rate of 22 to 27%. And this is from Wikipedia.
Whatever you shielded me from, I'm assuming it was young people getting hurt. I am.
Yep. So we're not gonna talk about that.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Shocking rates there, though. So now we're going to go into the main piece, which I found so interesting and brought me to this, which is the Aporia piece, how belief in witchcraft holds Africa back. But I wanted to start you as the framing so you understand this isn't some crazy racist or something
right.
like that.
This is pervasive. It's especially because it's even something that you and I saw in the townships.
Yeah, when I was in Africa, I remember flyers for like which doctors you could hire and stuff like that, like on the streets.
Yeah, because I really wouldn't have believed it. So we've also seen it in person. But yeah, these ample examples also demonstrate that this is hardly isolated, which is,
and our God.
And what you're revealing to me, which is really surprising, is how pervasive this is, at least in some countries among educated groups, which totally shocks me.
Well, and our guide, I remember he was telling us a story that had happened not long ago in the region, so it was like really vivid for him, of some people who got in a shootout with police and were like very aggressive with stealing from the local area, and it was because a witch had told them he had made them invulnerable to bullets.
Yes.
And then he had not, of course, and this did not turn out well for them. And again, with this, I'm always reminded of the traditionalist Christians where I'm like, your kids are at serious risk of the urban monoculture deconverting them and turning them against you. And they're like, no, don't worry. I have practiced Christianity in the way my ancestors did. And I taught my kids the way my grandparents did. And so they're safe. And I'm like, they are not safe.
Nope.
You are dealing with guns and you are using witchcraft. You need to build stronger methods because your kids will be castrated and let off in triumphs. I guarantee it. If you send them with this magical armor on. So I think that's always important for all of us to be aware of, is to not coat our own children in the magical armor of our ancestors, or they will get in a shootout with police believing they're invulnerable to bullets. But anyway, to continue here. One of the most significant ways belief in witchcraft hinders development is by discouraging entrepreneurship and wealth creation. In many African societies, individuals fear that economic success will bring trouble, as those who accumulate wealth are often accused of using witchcraft to prosper at the expense of their peers. Unsurprisingly, this fosters an environment where capable individuals deliberately eschew success as to evade accusations of sorcery. And here they are citing a study relationship between social status and witchcraft in Africa by Christopher R. Magwasha or something.
Oh my.
Indeed, a study of rural Tiv communities in Niger by Nugtor Samba and Dajo Ugba confirmed the fear of the supernatural retribution discourages individuals from engaging in business. It also found that wealthy individuals sometimes go to great lengths to conceal their financial status, the better to avoid being labeled as witches. This has serious consequences. When people refrain from entrepreneurship out of fear, societies are deprived of opportunity for development. So again, you see, this isn't just me saying, oh, they have these backwards beliefs and this is hurting them. This is documented by African peer-reviewed publications. William Darley and Charles Blankson also found evidence that superstitious beliefs suppress productive behavior in Africa. Many aspiring business owners actually worry that envious individuals would use witchcraft to destroy their ventures. Such worries act as a psychological barrier, discouraging risk taking and innovation. The entrepreneurial spirit is replaced by fatalism, leaving economic potential untapped. And so this is a piece titled Sub-Saharan African Cultural Belief Systems and Entrepreneurial Activities, a Ghanaian Perspective, that came out in 2020. Again, this is not somebody's perspective. These are a bunch of African researchers who are writing this. What's more, people are less likely to be held accountable under these conditions because failures can be blamed on external vices. The fear of witchcraft can be so powerful that entrepreneurs choose not to expand their business, hoping to thwart the plans of suspected witches. A study in Cameroon documented that entrepreneurs not only reject managerial solutions to business challenges, but frequently attribute those challenges to supernatural forces, including ancestral spirits and witchcraft. And this study was another determinant of entrepreneurship, the belief in witchcraft and entrepreneurship. To continue, even the financial sector is not immune to the influence of superstition. Essene Essen has documented that some Nigerians engage in ritual defacement of currency notes, believing it will ward off evil powers. The problem is so egregious that it accounts for practically all of the defacement of Naira. Others avoid using bank services altogether because they suspect that their money will be manipulated through supernatural means. It is not only costly for the central bank to replace disfigured notes, irrational behavior undermines the functioning of a modern financial institution and stymies integration with the global economy. Witchcraft beliefs also distort governance by reinforcing authoritarian leadership. In many African countries, political figures exploit these beliefs to consolidate power, silence opposition, and maintain social control. In a recent study, Johanna Addison and colleagues examined how leaders use narratives surrounding witchcraft to justify their rule. Leaders often claim supernatural protection or accuse rivals of engaging in sorcery. Instead of evidence-based policymaking, they rely on mysticism to legitimize their authority. South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma was known for exploiting the deep-seated reverence for ancestor worship to manipulate voters into supporting his policies. And this was cited, a piece here, Zuma, vote ANC, or faced ancestral wrath. And then the study that was talked about here was Power, Politics, and the Supernatural, exploring the role of witchcraft believed in governance for development. Superstition is particularly visible in electoral politics, where supernatural interventions are frequently invoked for political outcomes. When a politician loses an election, it is not uncommon for their supporters to blame the loss on witchcraft rather than ineffective campaigning or voter dissatisfaction. This erodes trust in the democratic process and elevates conspiracy theories over rational judgment. And talk about the level of like externalizing you get from this when political losses are blamed on witches. A belief in witchcraft also fosters corruption in government. Public officials who believe in supernatural forces may prioritize rituals and magic over accountability and transparency. Some even divert state resources to traditional healers or spiritualists rather than investing in infrastructure or social programs. At the local level, accusations of witchcraft are a major source of violence. And here it is linking to a study by Suffolk University Law, The Problem of Witchcraft and Violence in Africa. And the victims are usually women, young children, or marginalized members of the community. An individual accused of witchcraft may be ostracized, attacked, or even brutally killed. Such acts obviously erode trust and weaken social bonds, making it difficult for people to cooperate and build a civil society. And again, if nothing's ever anyone's fault, if a politician can lose in its witches or a politician can win in its witches, it's hard to attempt to learn from things. It's the same with like entrepreneurship. If who's successful, it's not like I need to look at who's successful so that I can study what they did that made them successful. It's, oh, I look at who's successful, but they got there because of witches. Therefore, nothing that they did is particularly useful to learn to copy from.
Yeah, or their lesson was, I just didn't spend enough money at the, like with the magician or witch doctor or whatever it is, that like my opponent spent more, so his spells were better. Like, I mean, I think even if you use magic, I guess the assumption is that the other side had better magic, and then you just don't, again, you don't learn anything. I don't know if our own elections are, I mean, I guess you can, but I mean, I think often our own elections are pretty poorly analyzed as well, because they're like, well, the other side just raised more money and did more ad spend, but I don't know how effective.
No, look at Democrats right now. Like, even as corrupt and bad as the party is, and as dumb as they are, they realize they need to learn to win the male vote, right? Like, they're like, how do we get young men to vote Democrat?
They've admit that they've lost the male vote. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they give it to their version of witches, which is like statisticians and analysts. They give them $20 million and they come back and say, we need more boots on the ball kicking machine. I love the Freedom Tune skit on this particular topic.
All right, so let me go through some of our positions, and you stop me where you feel uncomfortable. A higher minimum wage, healthcare reform, the ball kicking machine, social safety nets.
Wait, could you repeat that last one?
Sure, social safety nets.
Before that.
Oh, the ball kicking machine.
I don't like the ball kicking machine.
Not a fan
Yeah,
either.
I don't like that at all.
Oh, the machine we want in your house to kick your balls all the time?
Yes.
No, that can't be it.
Okay, so what does our $20 million study show?
The machine needs more boats.
That is I can't believe that they built a commission to try to find out why young men aren't voting for them, and they put a woman in charge of it. And it's like, could that be why? Could that be why? Could that have anything to do with it? Is your systemic discrimination against men? But anyway, the harmful impact of witchcraft belief extends beyond business and government to the domain of public health. Misconceptions about the causes of different diseases and how to treat them are widespread in Africa. This is particularly true when it comes to HIV/AIDS. Amar El-Kasari and Amir Bemenava studied Senegalese people's beliefs about HIV, revealing that many women believe the infection is caused by witchcraft, as opposed to sexual intercourse with an infected person. As a consequence, such women do not take protective measures like using condoms or getting tested, and the disease continues to spread. And this can be very damaging economically to have these sorts of diseases spread within a region. In a similar study, Eric Tekanaranga and colleagues examined how superstition impedes HIV prevention efforts in Ghana, owing to entrenched beliefs that infectious diseases are caused by witches. Many people refuse
to. I wonder how much we would need PEPFAR if instead we invested in anti-witch, but that can't come from outsiders. It has to come from within. I was referring to the like for people with HIV in Africa.
About the other thing that we were talking about.
Yeah, the USAID used to provide a lot of aid.
This is it, where everyone is like, oh, USAID's no longer providing to Africa. Well, maybe convince them that it's not witches that are causing AIDS.
Yeah, like I'm wondering how many cases of HIV could have been prevented if instead this belief was targeted. But I also am well aware of the fact that you can't have an external party, especially a bunch of white people.
No, if a bunch of American like progressives came in, they'd be like, you're 100% spreading.
They'd be like, okay, so it's definitely the witchcraft. It's 100% the witchcraft. Yeah.
to entrench beliefs that infectious diseases are caused by witches, many people refuse to believe that behavior makes a difference and as such do not take preventative measures. Some turn to spiritual healers for cues rather than seeking medical treatment. And this is citing an article that is titled, "I visited a traditional healer because I felt I wasn't getting any better using active antivirals. Understanding the cultural imperatives in the context of adherence to highly active antiretroviral therapy." This is a public health journal. And such healers claim to possess supernatural abilities that can cure AIDS, convincing patients to abandon retroviral therapy. Aside from reinforcing irrational beliefs, this puts additional strain on the public healthcare system. Perhaps the most horrifying consequence of the superstition is, and you probably want to take off your headphones again,
Thank you.
the abuse of children. In some African cultures, those born with disabilities are considered spirit children, as we talked about before, and are thought to bring misfortune on their families. Emmanuel Uswell has documented how children suspected of being possessed are sometimes poisoned, drowned, or simply abandoned. Despite its effort to curb these practices, they persist due to deeply ingrained beliefs. Maswari Adaki studied the phenomenon of child witch hunts in Ghana, where children are accused of witchcraft and tortured or exiled from their communities. Tragically, it is orphans and those from impoverished backgrounds who are the most likely to be accused.
Thanks, by the way. You're
Yes.
so sweet. I know we don't believe in trigger warnings, but like also I'm
That is your trigger warning. She gets very sad when she hears about children being hurt.
destroyed by it. Yeah, I just need to pretend that it never happens.
It
or
never
else it
happens.
won't function. Yeah.
But I found this really fascinating because I had assumed that, even having, been to Africa, been, to the townships, saw the witchcraft being practiced at the townships, I never really put together. And I mean, we saw it. We went to.
Yeah, but it wasn't in a wealthy area. So I think we were like, well, I guess this is common among people who don't have high levels of education or who aren't.
But when I think about myself growing up, so I lived in Costa Rica on a reservation for a period where there was like a wildlife reservation, right? And this is when I was in high school. I didn't live with my family in high school, so many people know I lived in a lot of weird places. And one of them, I reached out to a scientist and I was like, "Hey, can I help you with your work? It looks pretty interesting." They're like, "Yeah, come out here." So I went and I helped do science in Costa Rica. And so, I got to meet a lot of other people who did science in the region, and many of them had been stationed in other places. And I remember one of them who had been stationed in Africa talked to me about how one of the, people he worked with in some capacity, I can't remember the capacity exactly, but it was clear that this was an educated, high status individual,
Okay.
wasn't just like a believer in witchcraft, but considered himself a dark witch from a family of dark witches.
Oh,
And they did really, and in Africa, this happens. You have murders associated with witches, not infrequently. You have grapes associated with witchcraft, not infrequently. This is something that, I remember the stories he told me, and I thought he was embellishing to sound cool or something. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, he might have really known a guy who had people murdered for, witchcraft reasons. That's pretty crazy to think about.
that is pretty crazy to think about. And then you have the weird witchcraft that's practiced in the United States where people buy spells on Etsy. So I don't know.
I can only imagine them going to one of these African witches. That's when you're getting in the real stuff. And it's crazy how Christian these countries are as well. And yet they still engage with this stuff.
Yeah, it's really clear to me that adhering to one religion, unless that religion is really explicit about other religions, although Christianity is this whole thing of like false idols and stuff. What do you do as a religion to stop people from
Christianity is spare not a witch to live. It's very clear. Like, do not engage.
How do you square that? It's just
Well, they say, well, I'm a good witch. I'm aligned with Jesus or something, right? A lot of people, they don't know their Bibles that much. And it is local tradition. It is their local culture. I mean, what you are asking is the eradication of a local cultural practice, which is a form of cultural imperialism, right? But what I'm trying to point out here is if they do not address this cultural practice, economic development, even if all other things have been fixed, becomes incredibly difficult.
yeah. Yeah, and this makes me a little bit nervous about the secular religions that are rising in the United States, and not just the secular religions.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, because you would argue that, charismatic
Charismatic Christianity.
Christianity is a form of witchcraft.
Yeah, I would.
We have a long episode where she argues that we may do for our Patreon subscribers, because I don't want to piss off too
In
many people.
Substack, yeah, any paid subscriber, yeah, you're just. I guess that's fair because charismatic Christianity is the fastest growing type of Christianity in the United States. So we're gonna get in trouble for me calling them all witches, but
evidence.
they're witches. So,
I mean, it is what we would call witchcraft within most other contexts.
dude, yes, hello.
They're just like, but I'm doing it for Jesus, so it doesn't count. And it's like, well,
No.
I don't know if that's how it works.
No,
If you're doing things that we historically considered witchcraft and that were, within the case of charismatic Christianity, some case directly borrowed from the spiritualist and Wiccan movement and not traditionally Christian. And they don't realize that they took these practices from the Wiccan and spiritualist movement. They think that they're unique. And I'm like, no, this came from the spiritualist boom in the 1920s.
It's just, it feels like such a classic biblical, like it's the biblical version of my cabbages. Like it just is this theme that constantly comes up of like God to humans. Hey, like, stay focused. Just me, okay? No false gods. Stick to the plan. And then humans are like, no, but
can I have
golden calf?
Can I pray to some dead humans?
Just one.
Well, as a way to pray to you. As a way to pray to you.
Yeah, it's really all about you.
But I mean, I'm buying this spell for you.
For you.
Of course, to cast on these other people, but I understand how it can become corrupted. It's just sad. And I wonder, I have seen actually some people, one of my friends of African descent has actually found a way to take these concepts and make them psychologically useful to him.
No, and I think a lot of people have taken folk practices. So tarot, for example, has become super popular.
Yeah, so this is one of my friends. He's not of a direct African descent. He picked up the religious traditions of, I want to say, one of the Caribbean cultural groups, I think Puerto Rican. And, they have, iterations of these practices within these cultures often. And one of them that he picked up was when he is struggling to make a decision about something, he rolls a 10-sided dice that has spiritual significance for him, and based on the number he makes a decision. And he finds that because of this, he's much more likely to go out to gatherings than he otherwise would be, because he's often like, I don't really know if I want to go out. And then the roll of the dice leads him to going out much more than he would otherwise, which I find to be really powerful, because he knows he still has like an out. He's leaning on a traditional cultural practice, but he's not using it to, blame his failures on successes or externalities. He's using it as a tool to get himself to do the types of things that he would prefer not to do more frequently, while still giving himself an out and still being able to.
Yeah, in other way, again, we're not hating on witchcraft. We're hating on practices that lead people to be less productive. But you can absolutely leverage these things in a way that do make you more productive. I think it's just the average person, just like we are with mysticism, right? Like there are some people who can absolutely handle more mystical things. Like some people can handle the Kabbalah. Most people can't. Like I in general would advise against it, but I would say, especially if it gives you an internal locus of control that leads to a problem solving process that tracks with science and physics, it's okay. I guess that's the problem. Is like some forms of witchcraft can lead to an internal locus of control, but it's like, well, my internal locus of control is to cast a spell, and like that doesn't track with good outcomes. So, but that is crazy. I mean, well, what do you think is going to happen to Africa then? They're going to get over it?
Demographic collapse is going to come to Western countries, and it's going to collapse aid networks. And as I've said, you can watch our video where we do a deep dive on what I think will happen to Africa. Africa might be one of the places that actually does quite well coming out of demographic collapse.
Right.
But it is going to look like specific cultures and ethnic groups and tribes doing really well, and not all of Africa doing well. It is going to come downstream of the atomization of Africa and the admission of what the colonialists should have admitted long ago, which is Africa is about tribal networks, and it's not about, sort of collectivism. These attempts to collectivize Africa seem to always lead to genocide and tragedy, because Africa is not a collective place. It is a network of tribal associations and cultural and ethnic groups that are much more distinct from each other than we are. As I often point out, if you take any two ethnic groups within Africa and you contrast them genetically speaking, they are almost always dramatically more, and I mean like 3 or 4 times more distant from each other than, you know, your average European is from your average Asian or Native American. They're just the amount of genetic and as a result cultural diversity in Africa is just hugely understated within the existing narrative. As I say, if you divided humanity into 8 ethnic groups, 7 of them would be groups of Africans, and 1 of them would include white people, Asians, Native Americans, Semitic
Everyone
people,
else.
Middle Easterners, everyone else, based on genetic distance.
That's
And a lot of
that's
people
so
don't
interesting.
realize
It blew my mind when you first pointed that to me. It's like that can't possibly. But
Well,
of course, it
actually,
makes sense
wait,
when you actually look at like the time done in
one of
certain
them
areas.
might be Australian Aboriginals as well, but that doesn't really break from the wider narrative here.
Yeah.
They're quite genetically distinct and make up a really unique immigrant wave, and there's a few other groups like that in the islands around there. It's not really, the larger point still stands.
Yeah, that is interesting. Huh.
Well, I love you, Simone. Did anything change about your world perspective?
Yeah, I didn't know that educated populations in many African countries also held to these traditional witchcraft beliefs. That really blows my mind. So, yikes. But also, yeah, I have hope for many African groups because yeah, there's a lot of different ones and a lot of different approaches, and surely this witchcraft isn't completely pervasive, and therefore the ones that either figure out how to use it in a productive fashion or who don't use it will be fine over the long run. And I worry more for where we're going, because I feel like we're adopting witchcraft and external locus of control associated religious affiliations, secular and otherwise, at a faster pace than we have since the very inception.
The United States,
Yeah, we, the United States, since the
not our
inception of
family.
our, oh yeah, not our family, but since its beginning.
I disagree. I think the spiritualist boom of the 1920s was probably bigger, but okay.
No, because that also, was taking place, at a time of huge economic growth, at a time of, I mean, there was a surge of it. I mean, relatively speaking, but where we are now is wild.
Yeah,
relatively speaking.
well, if you include charismatic Christianity among the witch cults, which you do.
Yeah, but also secularization. No, like, so Pentecostalism only just was starting to get, like, in very isolated churches. It began, I think, in the 1920s in California. It was only just warming up. And yes, there was spiritualism, but that was mostly among, like the weird elite. Like, it's kind of how rationalism is big today among certain circles, but most people have never heard of it before. I don't think it was as big as you think it was. And I think in the end, we are at a huge all-time peak in mysticism, witchcraft, and in general external locus of control associated worldviews. And I will get into that. I have an outline.
We need to bring in the inquisitors to handle the witches.
To your point, I think they kind of handle themselves.
All right, so Simone, dinner tonight. We are doing the pork things you made. You're going to reheat them, I guess, in the air fryer or something.
The pork buns. Okay.
Try to make them nice and crispy and hot.
Yeah, if you want, I can make. I think there are 2, and I think we can make sliders with them, if you want.
Well, we got you said we got noodles.
No, those are. I wouldn't eat that. They're like soggy and old now. Like vermicelli noodles don't last very long.
Okay, well then reheat them and let's make sliders with them and chop up some. What's the word I'm looking for here? Some like a scallion, like a small one.
Okay.
To put on top, and I think that'll be pretty good, right?
Yeah, scallions, 2 Hawaiian bun sliders of bun ma, sweet pork, tiny buns.
That'll go really well together.
Yeah. Would you like a mapo tofu, beef mapo tofu taku as well, or Or we can also make a slider with that inside it. So
Yeah.
if you don't like the
Sliders.
Bon sliders, then I'll just like give you an assortment of sliders and you like leftover sliders, and you can decide which
So
leftover
we can
slider.
have 2 bun ma and 1 mapo tofu. I don't like want that much mapo tofu, but the mapo tofu slider sounds good.
I mean, to try because it's leftovers.
I'm not gonna have 4 sliders. I don't want you to stuff me. You know what I mean?
Oh, God forbid. Okay, 3 sliders. I will do that. I love you so much.
I love you too.
4th of July tomorrow.
Ooh.
Explode some explosives.
What are we gonna blow up?
Well, fireworks, of course.
Or-
We're going to the family barbecue, and then maybe when we get back, we blow something up, or in the afternoon, whatever. It's kind of up to you because you have the kids in the afternoon portion during the morning with them. Okay, you want to check out? I'll call you when dinner's ready. Make sure your phone. There we go. You know, the really funny thing, actually, when I'm thinking about that really luxurious safari vacation and the like, how much we learned actually on the luxurious safari at Mambo Camp and Vimbur Plains versus how much we learned from that one afternoon touring the townships and like experiencing that. We got so much more from that than like the entire, I mean, in terms of like novelty and learning and like talking with our guide about like, what is South African property ownership like? And, you know, what's this, like, what's up with this market that we're walking through with all this sympathetic magic going on? Like, this is interesting. It was really like, that was quite interesting.
That wasn't. I mean, we got to see like we've been to Africa. We've been not just to Africa, but to the slums in South Africa and gotten to
the townships that we I think your mom had gotten like some kind of social media influencer documentarian who like specialized in the townships, and like he had a lot of like, I'm gonna not pronounce this correct, but like classy friends, and he was just like super connected. And so we went to visit a school in one of the townships. We visited a traditional market and
medicine in the townships. And
yeah,
it's clear these were just like people's houses that he was taking us to that were like these little like shack type things.
Yeah, with like no plumbing, no electricity. And I mean, it was so, as you know, like it's really colored the way that we look at how demographic collapse has played out, because he really gave us a look at what you have in a society where government has sort of lost its ability to adequately provide for the social services it promises. You know, he's like, well, yeah, we promise housing to everyone here. Like there's no property ownership. People are just promised a house, but therefore people don't take care of their houses and there's not enough housing supply. Also, we have lots of brownouts and there's security problems. And like we saw what that looks like. And that is what demographic collapse after a dependency ratio cascade looks like. And had we not driven around Johannesburg and the townships, and had we not seen that, we wouldn't have, at least for me, it wouldn't have hammered home what demographic collapse is going to feel like. Because seeing the contrast between that and then the walled gardens of Johannesburg and then other parts of Africa that are like incredibly wealthy and sheltered and like, you know, on their own, you know, out on the reservation, like to go from that to Mambo Camp with its canopies and the little hot water pillows they put in the beds at night.
The hot water pillows? I don't
Do you remember that? It was cold at night. So in the little canopy bed in our
they had
cabin,
little bags. Yeah.
They put like warmed hot water. It's like, what is this? But that's the future. You're going to have like the 0.001%, you know, on their little, you know, their walled gardens and their luxury things, you know, getting their hot water bottles in their bed. And then you're going to have everyone else living with brownouts and blackouts in the townships, promised everything, given nothing.
That's a really good point. And this is, you know, the way the Democrats do it. Promise, 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 give nothing.
Yeah. Well, because they can't. I mean, after demographic collapse plays out, unless, and like you say, there's some deus ex machina with AI, and that's a big if. It's a huge if. I think what will happen more is independent communities that manage to leverage AI to help with permaculture, to help with all sorts of things, manufacturing, et cetera. AI will help those communities, but it's not going to be this benevolent overlord that steps in and takes care of everything and provides universal supply. We'll see.
See, I could have tired of them acting in the show. Oh, Let's have a